Well, thanks for the introduction, and I hope, Keith, you understand now that the precedent has been set that you go from president of the CFA to the Senate. So there's no pressure at all. But thank you very much for inviting me here today, and I do want to just reiterate that as well, that I know a lot of people see a lot of things on committees in the House of Commons, but I am really proud of the work that we do at the Agriculture Committee. We do try our best to get along and find common ground on a lot of issues, except for maybe 2, 3, 4 right now, as Eve felt the firing squad a little bit. But there are some issues that I'm very passionate about, and I know for the members here today are also passionate about. But I really thought that your topic for this conference this week was really timely, about seizing opportunity in Canada's growing role on the world stage. Because I don't think there's any more important opportunity for Canadian agriculture than what is potentially there down the road. But there are some things that are going to be integral for Canadian agriculture to take advantage of those opportunities. You know, in a gathering like this, to have all of you in one room, I think is incredibly important as well, to have those discussions about what is a critical subject. But I think the question that I hope all of us will be asking each other over the next couple of days while you're here at this conference is Canada poised to take advantage of those opportunities that lay in front of us as Canadian agriculture? And I believe that this is a unique opportunity for Canada, because Canada is poised to be in an excellent position because we are making and producing what the world needs: energy, critical minerals and mining, forestry, and certainly agriculture. But the question that we have to ask ourselves, are we poised, as I said, to take advantage of that opportunity? Because I think Canada can play and should be playing an integral role in global food security, but certainly in rebuilding Canada's economy. Because Canada, whether you're in my home province of Alberta and Alberta beef, or BC berries, pulses in Saskatchewan, pork in Manitoba, dairy in Quebec, and certainly wine and fruits in Atlantic Canada and potatoes, Canada is producing, again, what the world needs. But I think we are at a critical crossroads, a junction where Canada must make the right decision, and we must decide wisely on which path we take. Are we going to choose a path where we will follow the European model, where we base policies on activism and ideology? Or are we going to cultivate our own path, where we make decisions that are based on innovation, science, data? Are we going to choose a path where we're imposing policies and legislation that is going to impede our ability to grow, erode our reputation of a trusted and reliable trading partner, that is going to put the economic viability of our farmers at risk? Or are we going to choose a path where we ensure policies are based on sound science and data, where we remain globally competitive, where we are aligned with our most trusted trading partners, and that we ensure our farmers and producers are environmentally sustainable, but also economically viable? That is the two paths that we can choose. And I can't stress enough how important it is that we make the right choice and we choose the path that is going to ensure you and your members, our producers, our ranchers, our manufacturers, our producers and processors are successful and growing, not just thriving, or not just surviving, but thriving. And these are questions that we should be asking ourselves. And I think the potential is quite clear. You see an article by in Farm Critic Canada a couple of weeks ago that showed that traditionally agriculture in Canada is growing at about 2% annually. But over the last 10 years, that growth has been around 1%. If we are able to remove obstacles, ensure that agriculture has the tools it needs, and get back to that more traditional 2% of annual growth, that is another $30 billion in cash receipts in the pockets of farmers in Canada. That is not an insignificant number. And it shows that we can do it. We've done it in the past. So what has happened over the last 10 years that we've seen that growth dissipate? So I find it odd that our current government is following that European farm-to-fork model, because we should be learning the lessons of what is going on in Europe right now, where we see farmers across the European Union protesting higher input costs, the green to green policies that are making it more difficult for now that a country that can no longer, or a continent that can no longer feed itself. Is that really the path that we want to go? Because the science and data clearly shows that that is the wrong path to choose. And I think that, especially here in Canada, it just simply doesn't make sense for us to follow that path. Because what we're doing in Canada is we've already shown the world that we are the world standard when it comes to sustainability, to innovation, to technology, and a smaller carbon footprint. I know I've been kind of harping on this study that came out from the Global Institute for Food Security, Saskatchewan, and I see we've got Ian here, so I'm sure he's quite well aware of it. But when you take a look at the information from that study, I think it clearly shows what Canadian agriculture has been able to accomplish. And you have accomplished this through embracing precision agriculture, innovation, new technology, not through government regulations and carbon taxes. When a ton of canola grown in Saskatchewan has a carbon footprint that is 67% lower than anywhere else in the world, that is something we should be proud of. When a ton of Canadian wheat can travel around the world 3.5 times before it has the same carbon footprint as wheat grown in the European Union, that is something we should be proud of and championing. You shouldn't be punished with higher carbon taxes and more regulations and red tape. And you take a look at, I think we can encapsulate this with one stat that I like to talk about quite a bit. But CropLife had put out some data a couple of years ago that showed, that we've reduced our carbon footprint by 80 billion tons and reduced diesel fuel usage by 200,000 liters per year. But you put all of these things together, and you see where Canadian agriculture is in terms of our global competitors and our partners. And I know these are stats that you know, but I don't think it hurts to kind of hammer this home every time we get that opportunity. On average, emissions from agriculture in other countries is about 28% of their total emissions. In Canada, we are 2/3 of that at 8%. So let's put that in perspective. So in Canada, we are responsible for about 1.6% of total global emissions. Of that 1.6%, 8% of that comes from agriculture. There is not an industry on this planet that can make such a boast, that you've been able to maintain your emissions, if not lower them in many cases, but increase production by more than 50%. These are stats that every industry in the world would fall over themselves to be able to brag about. But the only ones who can is you in Canadian agriculture. And because of these stats, and because of your willingness to embrace new ideas and new ways of doing things, I truly believe in Canadian agriculture. I know that our agri-food and our agriculture industries will play a critical role in Canada's reputation on the global stage and growing Canada's economy and helping us get out of this very difficult financial situation we find ourselves in. And I say I don't think I can stress this enough either, how important it is or what the role that Canadian agriculture can play in helping Canada rebuild a reputation on the global stage, which I firmly believe has been eroded over the last number of years. Again, there's no question one of the top priorities around the world is food security. And 80% of what we produce in Canada, we export. We are one of only a handful of countries who can fill that gap. And I know it is some stress and some pressure that our farm families are proud to bear that burden. But in order to meet that challenge, in order for us to meet our potential, we have to ensure that government policy and regulation provides you the tools that you need to meet that challenge. And I just believe right now we're making the wrong choices and making the wrong decisions and going down the wrong path. We have to ensure that we remove government red tape and we remove government policy and remove bureaucratic obstacles that are in your way for you to meet your full potential. So, to reach our full potential as Canadian agriculture, what do you need? Number one, we must ensure that all decisions in legislation and policy and regulation are based on true, sound science and innovation, not activism, and certainly not what you see on social media. We need to ensure that CFIA is a partner to Canadian agriculture, not an adversary. We need to ensure that the decisions made by the PMRA are made on science, not politics. We need a situation where the federal government defends Canadian interests and shows intestinal fortitude when they are challenged by unfair trade practices and non-tariff trade barriers. We must stand up for Canadian producers. We need to have a country and policy where our producers and our farmers are rewarded for their environmental accomplishments, not punished with higher taxes and more regulation. We need an environment where our farmers, our processors, our manufacturers are encouraged to grow and invest because Canada boasts a competitive tax regime and smart regulations. We need a regime where the federal government is a partner to Canadian agriculture, where we help educate Canadians about where their food comes from, how you do it, why you do it, and the fact that we do it under the highest standards in the world. When it comes to human rights, labor, environment, no one does it better than Canada. You set the gold standard. Folks, I know that Canadian agriculture will play a critical role in Canada moving forward. I'm very proud of everything that you are doing. I'm proud to be working with you as often as I can. Because again, everyone in this room, you are producing what the world needs: an abundance of reliable, nutritious, locally grown, affordable food that not only helps feed Canadian families, but helps feed families around the world. But again, for us to meet that challenge, for us to meet that potential, we have to ensure we choose the right path. And that starts with you, and that starts with us. It starts with choosing that right path, and it starts with choosing the right leadership. Thank you very much for having me here today, and I'd certainly be happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you. Thanks very much, John. And we have a question. Here we go. Just identify who you are.
Yes, Bethany Dykstra from New Brunswick. I really liked what I heard with regard to giving farmers the tools and the resources and the regulations needed to do our business and working together. I think that is really crucial. I'm going to throw out to you as well, what do you think of the $15.5 billion that we just heard today that the U.S. is planning to give their farmers from the Treasury to help with environmental issues on the farm? What are your thoughts about that in terms of both trading with the U.S. in terms of our competitors, and whether you do the same here in Canada for us? I know not 15, I mean, that's a huge number, right?
Yeah.
And you have to look at things relative. They're 10 times bigger than us and everything, but what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's a good question. For us, obviously, the numbers would never jive to what we can accomplish here in Canada, but our decisions we have to make here in Canada, it's not necessarily the quantity of money, but I think it's resetting our priorities. I just feel that we've set our focus on really one issue when it comes to agriculture, where we have to shift that process back to investing in innovation, again, research. I believe that Canada should be the hub of agricultural research. We're never going to compete with the United States dollar for dollar when it comes to their subsidies. So I think we really have to focus on what priorities we want here in Canada. I'll be going down to DC here in a couple of weeks to start to try and build some of those relationships with our counterparts. Certainly we're going to be having a review of CUSMA starting in 2025, really kicking in 2026. We need to ensure that our relationships with our most trusted trading partners are as strong as they possibly can be. But to be able to meet the challenges of the money that the United States is investing or propping up, I guess, their agriculture sector, just makes it that much more important that we have a tax and a regulatory regime here in Canada that keeps us competitive globally. And right now, we just don't have that.
So if I could just ask one further question?
Yeah.
Does your party feel that it is important for the average Canadian to help help the farmers with this big issue of the environment, or should it just be laid on us?
No, I think you raise probably the number one issue, which encapsulates all of this that we were discussing, is you have to rebuild that, I don't want to say trust, because I believe Canadians truly trust farmers, but we have to focus on that education, the narrative that's being put forward. And here's what I mean by that. The federal government isn't going to answer all the problems facing agriculture. There's certainly some things that just are out of everyone's hands. But there is some critical roles the federal government plays. And that starts with ensuring that the narrative that you are building around agriculture is positive. But when you are increasing carbon taxes, you are asking them to reduce fertilizer, when you are putting front-of-pack labels and banning P2 plastics, the message you are sending to Canadians is that Canadian farmers are laggards, that there is a problem in that industry. We need to change that narrative and ensure that policies are putting you in a very productive light or positive light. I don't believe it for a second that Canadians don't trust farmers and understand that you are not part of the problem, you are an integral part of the solution. But it behooves the federal government to also get that message out there and augment that every chance we get, and I just don't believe that's happening.
Thank you.
No, you're so right, John, and it's become very apparent to me, especially in the last couple of years, there's a lot of private sector money that's willing to invest. We look at the U.S. getting 20 times what we do with venture capital money, and so how do we create that arena, that atmosphere to bring that money here for us? So Ron's got a question for you.
Thank you, John, very much for your comments, and appreciate all the work that you've done in the past and hopeful to do in the future also. A couple of questions, I guess, that your other cohorts had mentioned that you didn't, I guess, is your stand on Bill C-234 and also your party's opinion on the advance payment program, where that level should be. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Just before I answer that, just to add to what Keith said, we can't attract investment in Canada without a clear path to success. And when you're saying the delays on the gene editing approvals, for example, the pauses on MRLs, you're sending a message again, not only to consumers who maybe don't follow that so much, but certainly to industry and investors that they're not looking at Canada because it's too difficult to get ideas and projects to reality. So unless they see a clear path to success or a clear path to a decision, they're not going to invest in Canada. So we also need to clear that up. On 234, this has been a huge labor of love for me. We were so close to getting this done, but to see what transpired in the Senate, it's really difficult to get a private member's bill to royal assent. And to see the shenanigans that went on in the Senate is really frustrating. Now, I know there's probably, my colleague Eve is going to say that he wants to get this through and just regardless. I wasn't elected to represent my constituents in Foothills to pass bills just for the sake of getting it done. I don't believe in passing bad legislation. And passing 234, as it is amended, does not include the exemption for heating and cooling barns. This will cost farmers $900 million annually. Obviously, I know those of you who are drying grain would love to see this pass, but the fact that we are having that 3-year sunset and not including greenhouses and heating and cooling barns, I just don't believe we pass something that is done incorrectly. And that those amendments were there, have nothing to do with trying to improve this bill. They were there to delay and kill this bill, which they've been somewhat successful in doing. On the advance payment program, yes, I was very disappointed to see that. We were given no heads up. We didn't see this, have any rumors that this was happening, especially with the high costs, input costs that you are facing right now. I know I've heard from producers across the country who are really hesitating to buy fertilizer without the access to that APP or to where it was at $3.50. Really disappointed to see, with everything that you are facing, to see that decision come down by the agriculture minister is really disappointing.
Well, again, thanks very much, John, and I know you're probably around for the reception tonight,
Yes,
are you?
absolutely.
Yeah, so he's never afraid to have a conversation, so thanks once again for coming, and appreciate your remarks. Yeah.
Senator Curry, ladies and gentlemen.